This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Permix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Krill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. Welcome in to episode number 62 of the Huskies Warming House podcast. I'm Noah Grant, joined alongside my co-host Nick Maxon. Nick, happy Sunday to you. Not a happy Sunday for Minnesota Wild fans, unfortunately. We're going to touch on them in the extra ice session about what it means for their playoff hopes, currently down 3-1 in the series at this time of recording. A very quick Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup we'll hit you with, as well as some great information as we start off our NCHC previews for the next 7 weeks here. The Colorado College Tigers are on the docket for us, and we're excited to get to them, and we won't leave you waiting, starting off with the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
First item of discussion here, Noah, in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. The playoffs are underway in the NHL, and as we all know, it's heightened intensity, it's heightened speed, more importantly, heightened physicality, and for players that are already playing banged up, and for those who maybe got through the regular season unscathed, injuries do certainly amount here in the NHL playoffs. The biggest one here the last week was Toronto captain John Tavares, who was clipped in the head by the knee of Corey Perry after he was taken down in the middle of the ice. Tavares was transported to a local hospital in Ontario, and he spent overnight undergoing some tests, but it looks like he came back all clear. But Tavares is out indefinitely. What appears to be a concussion is also a knee injury that was found on the Toronto captain. The Minnesota Wild will be without forward Marcus Johansson, who suffered a broken arm after running into the net in Game 3 against the Vegas Golden Knights. Among the smaller bang-ups here, Washington is still missing netminder Vitek Vanacek after he strained his lower body back in Game 1 against the Boston Bruins, who currently have a 3-1 series lead over the Washington Capitals. Finally, Justin Faulk is questionable after taking a high hit from Colorado forward Nazem Kadri in Game 2 of last week. That hit did earn Kadri a 8-game suspension from the Department of Player Safety, and Faulk did not return from Game 3 into the St. Louis lineup.
Yeah, that John Tavares one, Nick, I tell you what, that one was nasty, but 2 weeks at least he'll be out, if not more. A bevy of hirings and extensions also occurred around the National Hockey League and the hockey world last week. Vancouver extended head coach Travis Green for multiple years, despite a sub-500 record this past season. In the same boat is Detroit, who inked head coach Jeff Blashill to an extension as well. On the front office side, the New Jersey Devils added former U.S. Olympian Megan Duggan as the manager of player development. She joins former U.S. teammates Kendall Coyne-Schofield and Cami Granato, and also Canadian rivals Haley Wickenheiser and Danielle Goyette in NHL coaching or management jobs. Schofield joined Chicago in November as their player development coach. Granato is a pro scout for Seattle, and Goyette joined Toronto as director of player development because Haley Wickenheiser, who we touched on last week, was promoted to senior director in that department in the past week. Finally, ESPN announced that Leah Hextall will be the first female play-by-play voice that will be regularly involved in a national TV broadcast for the NHL. Hextall most notably called the recent 5-overtime game between North Dakota and Duluth in the NCAA regionals.
The NHL also announced the final lottery percentages for this year's upcoming entry draft. The Buffalo Sabres have the best odds at 16.6%, followed by the Anaheim Ducks, the Seattle Kraken, and the New Jersey Devils, all of whom have a over 10% odd. Columbus is the 5th team to run out the package, and these odds are based on the inverse order of the regular season standings. The expansion Seattle Kraken will get the 3rd best odds, just as the Vegas Golden Knights did in 2017 during their inaugural campaign. The lottery will be held on June 2nd. The draft is scheduled for July 23rd through 24th. There isn't a consensus number 1 pick in this year's draft, but Michigan defenseman Owen Power is considered by many to be the top player available for those teams in this upcoming draft. One rule affecting the draft does include the last place team now with the changes cannot draft lower than 3rd overall, meaning that Buffalo can pick no worse than 3rd this draft. Previously, though, Detroit picked 4th overall despite having the best odds in the entry draft last season.
And our final topic, Nick, sticking out east and in the southeast, I should say. Keith Yandle missed Game 3 for the Florida Panthers, but his Ironman streak is still alive. Yandle owns the 2nd longest Ironman streak in NHL history, having played 922 consecutive regular season games. The streak is still alive since it's a playoff game, according to Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman. Yandle registered 27 points in 56 games this season. However, Wednesday's game will mark the first time Yandle has been scratched in an NHL contest since 2009. Doug Jarvis holds the current Ironman record at 964 games. Once again, welcome into episode number 62 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick, welcome in on this Sunday, a little bit earlier than usual, not by much, but yeah, we're up and at it this Sunday, although I'm really excited. Monaco Grand Prix is going on in Formula One here. Max Verstappen's in the lead. Got to like that at this current time anyway. And I get to skate twice today. So how about that? I'm excited about today on Sunday, besides the fact I got to edit this darn thing. But Nick, I know you're working today, but what's been going on in your world and how have you been?
Doing pretty well. Summer classes have finally started. I'm taking a summer class just to try to alleviate some of my busyness as, no other is where this going to be to sound. And it sounds weird for probably a lot of people is, for those, I have a very intriguing personal story that got me to this point. I'm not going to go through that all, but part of that has been, having, I guess you could say, tunnel vision to get to what should be my graduation in 12 months. It's odd in my brain to be in this position because there was a point in time where I never thought I'd be in this spot. And so looking ahead and try to look at, you could say, month 13, which is not something I've really looked forward to just very in depth, to try to give myself the best chance to concentrate on what that next step might be in the spring. I'm taking some classes now to try to lighten the load for this upcoming fall and spring. So that way, whatever decision I have to make for employment, hopefully, which will be in the sports broadcasting world, then I have plenty of time to make the necessary trips, to meet the necessary people, and to make a decision based on those.
Yeah, I mean, I know your story, or at least I think I know your story, and it's been quite the journey for you. I think that's putting it lightly, and I'm excited in some ways to see you hit that point. I'm also like, not that I imagine we're going to be doing this forever, but it's also interesting to think about where you're going to be in 12 months related to this. I think you and I have talked about, like, our goal is to get through the season, the upcoming season, and then kind of reevaluate. Who knows, you might be in Florida covering basketball or something crazy like that. Like this career will take you in crazy places. So yeah, I'm excited for you to get to that point. How are summer classes that have started? This is the first summer in 5 summers now that I have not had summer classes for my program. I've just been working straight up doing marketing. So how are your classes going?
Not bad. This is actually my first time taking summer classes. Again, just because of how busy I think people in my major are. You have your classes and you have the extracurriculars. It just never stops. It just feels like the training just keeps rolling. The good news about the classes, that I'm taking is that they're asynchronous, and they're all online right now. So
for those who don't know, asynchronous means that he doesn't have to show up for class as long as he does the assignments by X date or X time. So I just didn't know if anybody didn't know that, because asynchronous classes are the best until you forget about an assignment.
Yeah. So there's, certain things in a certain order. And as long as essentially there's the 2 tests, I believe, that just have more of a stricter take by dates per se, but there's no, like you said, there's no scheduled class times. You log in, you do the materials on your own time when it's most convenient. You do the assignments, all that good jazz. So it especially for someone like me who's can be busy quite a little bit at a time. So it helps me be able to do it when I feel like I can sit down and actually commit the time to it. So it's actually it's a nice little thing for me. And I think for folks who are looking to try to either take out some stress for the fall or the spring for next year, whether it's a major you think you need it or not, I think it's a cool just to kind of get ahead.
Yeah. In fact, I don't even know. I can't even think of many summer classes you can take that are synchronous classes, right? I do remember a couple of years ago, I took an ethics class that was a 2-week class in the summer. So it would be done. We went for, what was it, like 4 or 5 hours a day for like 2 straight weeks. And that was the class. They like crammed an entire 16-week class into that like section. It was crazy. So I wish you the best of luck in your summer classes. I guess I don't have anything else to add on that. But speaking of schools and classes, Nick, we got a kind of an interesting little tidbit from one of our fans here. And I'm going to read the tweet here. This comes from David Amber on Twitter. And it says, some exciting news out of Nashville as Tennessee State University is exploring the possibility of becoming the first HBCU to begin a men's and women's hockey program. TSU is partnering with the NHL, the Predators, and College Hockey, Inc. How about that? We've seen a couple of rumblings of teams potentially going to the Division I level. We're seeing teams adding the game of hockey, especially in a place like Nashville. I know we touched a lot on the Alabama-Huntsville section, right, last year. How exciting do you think it would be to see a couple of teams out in the Music City that would partner with the Nashville Predators, who had a pretty thrilling double overtime victory against the Carolina Hurricanes the other night?
Well, we talk about the expansion of the game quite a bit, Noah, and I think anytime the conversation is, especially in what I think we would call in a non-traditional market, such as, especially in a state like Tennessee, right? That's always exciting news because, you start filling in the gaps a little bit. It's almost like you're tracing some of those connected dot puzzles, right? The more dots that you can scatter around, the clearer the picture of interest in the United States will be. And let's be frank. I mean, you can connect this to the growth of the game in Nashville, who I still remember, was it 2017 in their cup run, or is it 2016?
Yeah, 17.
It was 17.
I still remember in that game where they had a legitimate chance to push it to 7 games and ran into a good goaltender.
Good goaltender. But with that being said, when they were showing some of those community shots of when they shut down, I think is that Broadway Avenue that's in front of Nashville Arena. Yeah. I mean, they estimate over 1 million people were outside that building. It was ruckus. And honestly, I mean, that's a positive sign. But the bigger positive sign is when you're starting to see youth programs emerge, such as, college programs. And hopefully there's even more youth programs. Now, to be fair to your description, we do not know, because they didn't mention specifically, is it going to be a club team? Is it going to be a sanctioned Division I program? That's yet to be, actually announced. But having that conversation is, hey, I think we should be starting a hockey program. That's a good first step. As you and I both know, one of the biggest challenges to the game of hockey is its expenses. So we'll have to kind of see how they, kind of plan for that, and more so, how do they plan for a long-term sustainability of a program? As we know, the Alabama Huntsville, as we discussed earlier, was really trying to figure that out last season when they originally started their program. It was safe, but then the conversation kind of be, we can't just say this for 1 year. How do we get this to be safe for the next 5 to 10 years? So, be a story to follow. Either way, it's great news for the game of hockey.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually been on that strip. It's actually that, like you mentioned, that street is right next to the Country Music Hall of Fame, kind of kitty corner to Bridgestone Arena. And just what a great place to create a rockin' atmosphere. Also, I mean, I had a couple friends who played at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and they partnered with the Vegas Golden Knights in their facilities as well. It's always nice to see NHL teams and, sometimes college teams or higher up teams, if you will, in general, partner with their communities to continue to create a sustainable future for the game of hockey. I think that's the part that's most exciting to me and really exciting to look forward to. Speaking of looking forward, 2 things, Nick. We've got an exciting lineup coming to you for the Huskies Warming House podcast. We'll announce this at the end of the show again. But Josh Fenton is set to join us next week, albeit he's going to join us Wednesday night. So it is likely Not confirmed, but likely that the Healthy Scratch interview segment for this upcoming week will probably be on Thursday morning. I'm going to imagine, just because of the timing, because I guess he's a busy guy. I guess he's some commissioner or something. I don't know. Of course, the NCHC commissioner is joining us. And then Brett Larson, I think, is going to make a return, potentially bringing Scott Sandlin with him. We're going to see how that all shakes out. But he's definitely got some cool things to talk about with the golf tournament, some fundraising and things like that as well. Before we jump into Colorado College, one last thing here, Nick. We had a trivia question that had some controversy here. And I got this
controversy, you don't say.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I pulled this information from the NCHC page of College Hockey News. And so I assumed that this was the conference records that they had for the little table here. I think it might have been the overall records, which might have been the discrepancy, but nonetheless, it's interesting to talk about. So the question did read, albeit potentially falsely. Well, this is true. Colorado College is the only NCHC team in all 8 years of league existence to have a sub 500 winning percentage. However, name the other teams that have been sub 500. I said in conference play, I think it was overall, during at least 4 of the 8 seasons of league history. Any idea who the other teams that would be in that ballpark would be?
Well, number one, that has to be Miami.
Yep.
Also, Nebraska Omaha has to be there.
See, that's where the controversy came in, because if you go for conference only, the NCHC website says that Omaha has 4 of those seasons. But apparently if you go for overall, which I guess that's what the actual page down there was, I had Omaha at 3. So that's where the breakdown was. But nonetheless, yep, you're in the ballpark, and you got one other team that's there as well.
Oof.
A team that was a real thorn in St. Cloud State's side this year.
I was going to say it had to have been Western Michigan, because the other ones I just can't see them being sub 500.
Yeah, so like I said conference play. Carl Tillison was our winner. Congratulations, Carl. I think that potentially it might have been regular season. So I don't know. It was under the NCHC page of College Hockey News, so that's my fault if that's the case. But nonetheless, according to the data that they have, CC 8 sub 500 seasons since the NCHC has been around. That's tough. Miami at 7, Western at 4, Omaha at 3, St. Cloud has 2, Denver, I guess, according to this, that was their first sub 500 season since the NCHC's inception last year. Duluth and North Dakota are both at 0. Duluth has had exactly 1 straight 500 season, and Omaha has had 2 of those seasons where they've been exactly 500. Colorado College has come close a couple of times. They've had, as have Miami, they've had a couple of seasons where they missed out on that 4th place spot by essentially a win, being kind of clogged up in the middle there. So they're looking for their big bounce back year, or that year that really kind of takes them to the next step here. So let's jump right into that, Nick, shall we? The Colorado College Tigers are the first team on our NCHC preview here from the Huskies Warming House podcast. Fun fact about the Colorado College Tigers, Nick, is they did have some turnover with their coaching staff after Mike Havlin's departure. Does the name Scott Owens mean anything to you? Do you remember who Scott Owens was? That
name does ring a bell, but
if you saw a picture of him, I think you'd remember. Curly hair, glasses, about as old school as they get. Anyway, he was the longtime coach at Colorado College, the longest tenured and winningest coach in Colorado College history, 324 wins in the program, over 15 seasons, becoming the head coach in 1999, 16 All-American selections, 2 Hobie Baker winners, and they averaged 22 victories per season. And the 2004-05 team had a program best 31 victories and advanced to the Frozen Four, 3 regular season championships in the WCHA, and 7 NCAA tournaments. You're looking at me going, why the heck are you telling me all of this, Noah? Scott Owens, longtime Colorado College coach, was inducted in the 2021 Colorado Spring Sports Hall of Fame class this past week. So I thought that was kind of interesting as we move into Colorado College here. That they have some history that they were able to celebrate a little bit. You're like, what tangent is this kid going on? So, Nick.
The ship.
Okay. We'll start, before we get to coaches, let's start with the overall here for CC so I can get your opinion real quickly here. Colorado College finishing 4-17-2 overall with a minus 43 goal differential last year, 1.3 goals per game, 3.4 goals against, 5% power play, 70% on the PK. Their leading scorers, Josiah Slavin, Ben Copeland, and Grant Cruikshank at 13 points, 11 and 10. Of course, Cruikshank missed 7 games respectively on top of that as well. And then their next 2 players are tied at 6 total points for last season. Nick, we got to see this Colorado College team put up a pretty darn good fight against St. Cloud State in the NCHC playoffs in the first round, seeing their season end with a 2-1 victory for the Huskies. What was your overall impression of the CC team? They missed a couple of games because of COVID as well. But what was your impression of them, and what are your overall thoughts as you wrap up the season for them?
So a couple of things. First of all, CC, under Mike Havland, the now departed head coach, with their roster, there wasn't anybody really on their roster over the last many seasons. And I'm not trying to, come down on Colorado College. There's plenty of reasons for they have an extra difficult time recruiting. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But they played a style of play that they had to play due to the lack of star power. They had to play more of a trap like neutral zone. They had to be opportunistic to be competitive. And it's weird to think that, as you brought up some open power statistics, this program used to be one of the most perennial hockey teams in all of the college hockey world for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And it's weird to think that now, since the NCHC's inception, it has not had a single winning season. It's tough for them. When you really break down as to where this team is at, and I think we will do that here in a second, you have to tip your hat to this, especially the players in the CC squad. They never gave in. They battled hard. They made life a living, to all the teams that they played against. They just lacked the higher end skill that other teams in this conference really, you could say, just continue to reload every single year. And so it's tough. They're in a tough spot. And it really sounds like right now with some of the transition things with the new arena and now a new head coach, which we'll touch on here later, that I think this program is really looking for a more of a transition time to try to get back into a little bit more of a competitive program rather than just being where they have been the last few seasons.
Yeah, a lot of turnover, both player-wise and coaching-wise. The brand new coaching staff coming in, we're going to get to them in a second. I think the one that, if you're Colorado College, the one that really bites is junior Grant Cruikshank transferring to Minnesota. That one hurts because there's a guy, he's kind of that, I guess if you're talking in NHL terms, kind of that cornerstone piece that you like to build around. This is going to be a group that is going to be very young. And it's also going to be a group that is going to have to have contributions from those younger players. And I think the biggest thing, we talk in St. Cloud State hockey all the time about setting that culture, right? Setting that precedent. We think back to St. Cloud in the early 2000s, right? Known a little bit more of a party school, had a couple of winning seasons. Maybe it wasn't the most, I don't want to say not the most desirable place to go, but there were other places in the WCHA that players maybe had on their radar before they had St. Cloud State. Now, if you go into the recruiting process, I bet you Brett Larson is getting phone calls left and right for players but trying to get in a Husky sweater because of the way that this program has been built, especially within the NCHC, continuing to grow, having successful seasons. So, it's not like Colorado College is going to be, in the cellar forever. But it all starts with a culture change, that culture mindset. You see that with the turnover with the 3 coaches that are now coming in. You see that with the wave of fresh young bodies that maybe give a new perspective, a new fresh face, have a little bit of jump, a little bit of energy. And for lack of a better term, don't know what it feels like to lose a lot, unfortunately. Sometimes it's difficult. Look at the Jack Eichel situation, for example. Sometimes it's easy to get into that mindset where you're scratching and clawing, but it sucks to lose hockey games. There's no way around it. It just sucks. But when you look at CC and the infusion of new blood, the old blood going out, Nick, didn't have a whole lot to offer. I think the other 2 departures that hurt, Zach Berzola, of course, Huskies fans will know him well with that knee hit. Of course, with Vieti Miettinen, but he had a great campaign, signed with the Hartford Wolfpack in the AHL, and then sophomore Josiah Slavin signed with the Chicago Blackhawks. So there's your other 2 departures there. 4 graduates, Nick, 4 graduates, a combined 2 points total between 4 of them. So that's where I'm talking.
I want to interject here real quick. It's really hard, and this is the part when you have a program where it is that when you talk about a team that has never had a winning record, it's so hard to judge who the player is in a system under a coaching staff that they have been. I think it is fair to say, yes, they've had 2 points, but I think it's also clear to say that, the question could be asked, what could these players have done under the new regime coming in?
And that's not a knock on them. I think it's more a testament to there's a continuation or continuing need for this program to continue to try to elevate that game. So like you have McKay Flanagan and Brian Williams, they were guys who really kind of were on the bubble, if you will, only played a handful of games this year. So those are your first two departures. And then Troy Konzo and Jack Cates played 14 and 15 games respectively. And Troy Konzo had 2 points in those 15 games. So yes, to your point, this is not a knock on the players. I think it's just, again, a positioning of what does Troy Konzo look like for the University of North Dakota? What does he look like for a team that maybe is higher up in the standings? But again, to your point, Nick, where does this team go from there? And what do they take away from this senior group that is leaving that gave them a valiant effort, but maybe didn't have the results they were expecting?
100%. And I think, especially when you have coaches turnover, we saw this with Motzko. There were commits that had not signed their NLI that switched their commitments to a different university. We'll leave it at that. So at the end of it, that's the power of the coach, because when you get recruited, right? Is that the coach is selling you the university, but really what he's doing is selling you himself, or I should say herself, depending on who it is. So at the end of it, it's not surprising that some of these players transfer and yes, to some of them you're transferring to a more, you could say a more successful program in recent years. But, if your coach that spent all the time and to visit mom and dad and you at home in a different state, and even though that the results went there, you maybe respected or appreciated the coach that he was in Mike Havlin. At that point, if you lose your coach, now you're left with a spot where it's, well, I got a year or two left, or maybe I have 3 years left. Who knows? Again, everybody that played this year has an extra year of eligibility, not just the senior class. So they may think of it and go, well, I could be starting essentially my college career over somewhere else. Why not have a change of scenery if this is the end of an era? So it's interesting. It's an interesting spot, but I do think Colorado College is making the right moves, especially now with the opening of a new arena. I think they know that with the money that was, spent, and more so the money that was donated to build this, the results have to come with that, because the results probably were part of the promise of building this new arena for those fans down there in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, I think about the Colorado College Tigers, and you look at their wins that they had this year, and in years past, the past couple of years as well. They almost remind you, in a sense, of the Minnesota Wild of years old, and kind of the mid-20 teens, where they played that kind of hard and heavy defensive structure and really tried to be that opportunistic team. And I think you and I would both agree, as we're talking here, is it's safe to say that our main point is, how do we take that great defensive structure and turn it where it's almost similar to the women's hockey team for St. Cloud State too. How do you continue to build that offense so that you're spending more zone time on the other half of the rink, if you will, and take that great defensive play and complement it with the ability to be on the attack a little bit more? Is that fair to say?
Well, there's two parts to that, right? Because you have to have the players that can execute that style of play as well. And I think it would be, and again, not a knock to the players that were on the past rosters of CC. I don't know if that roster, even this last season, was capable of being the pusher of the pace per se. So it's going to take a couple of years now. Let's be honest. You have a new head coach. Hopefully he's got, I think a whole new coaching staff, if I recall. Yep. They're going to have quite the tough task here on the first couple of years, because again, you measure a coach, I think, in years 3 and 4. And that means, what have you done recruiting wise? What has this program looked like? So even if they don't, say, win an NCHC championship or whatnot, if they're now above 500, if they're actually beating teams on a consistent basis, like say Western Michigan, maybe they steal a couple from St. Cloud State, and even more so, let's say they go up to North Dakota and wax them and sweep them for a season. There's signs of success and progress they can look for, not just in their overall record, but the biggest thing for this new era of Colorado college hockey is the recruiting. And I think this perfectly transitions to, I think, the biggest challenge is Colorado College here, Noah, and I think I need to discuss. For recruiting, remember, CC is a private school, and it's not a cheap one. So the problem with athletics and with universities in general, whether you're public or private, is your funding sources, especially from, say, the governments, are drying up. And essentially these athletic scholarships that are being offered by the school come from a lot of, tuition money, also with donations, right? So with CC, that's more expensive. That's not a lot of money per se to give to some maybe those top recruits. Number two, if you want to play college hockey at CC and you don't get a half scholarship or full ride, it's a pretty tough sell to try to get them to pay $40,000 a year versus to go, say, St. Cloud, which is what, $12,000 or $13,000. So sometimes it comes down to money, and CC is in a very unique position as far, I think, of any team in the NCHC, where I think a lot of it can come down to the financial well-being of the student and their family to be able to afford that experience down at CC. With that being said, if you do, you can combat that by finally finding success, right? If a program finally finds its footing, they start to win more games. In theory, that means your alumni starts to chip in more, that maybe the school chips in more money for certain things at athletic board. So you can turn things around, but as we know, with anything in life, it does not happen overnight. It's not a light switch. And really the report card won't come out in the staff for under 3 years, and that's 2024 at the very earliest, in my opinion. So it's going to be an interesting battle for this new stuff coming in. But, again, recruiting is going to be the main number one priority for this squad moving forward to get somehow. And I don't know if you want to call steal, but, again, the NCHC is a one hell of a recruiting base with all these teams. And that's quite the competition. So you're going to have to try to steal some recruit stuff from some other schools if you want to try to climb back up in the standings.
Yeah, a great template I think to follow is Nebraska Omaha. There's a team that kind of plays a similar style as well and has really continued to build that success as we saw this past season. Also adding, like you mentioned on that recruiting side, adding for assistant coaches, former NHLer Mark Stewart, right? Former Colorado College Tiger as well. Excited to see him in the fold. And Peter Menino, who recently completed his 2-year stint in Des Moines as the head coach there in the USHL. Prior to that, spent 2 years actually at UNO and 4 years during his playing career as a goaltender with the University of Denver and the Pioneers, leading them to that Division I national championship as a freshman in 2005 and was named MVP of the Frozen Four that season. So great. I always like assistant coaches that also, you have a goaltender too. So you have a really great returning goaltender in I forget his name. I always want to say Mike Vernon, and it's not Mike Vernon. I don't have the roster pulled up here, Nick. Apologies that I can't think of his first name right now, but he's played fantastic. Remember when he was playing against St. Cloud State in the NCHC playoffs there, absolutely stood on his head. I believe it's Matt Vernon, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Matt Vernon. Yeah.
Matt Vernon. Okay. Mike Vernon. Jeez Louise. # Calgary Flames. Anyway. And then of course the addition, like you mentioned, that biggest speech to Chris Mayette spent 2 seasons as an assistant coach at St. Lawrence under head coach Greg Carville, who I heard had a pretty good year this year, winning a national championship with UMass, and most recently was with the University of Michigan for the past 2 seasons with head coach Mel Pearson, and spent 5 years in Providence as well. So Nick, you look at this coaching staff, right? They have the pedigree. They've been there as players. Of course, Mark Stewart in the NHL. Peter Menino had his time with the New York Islanders organization, and you've got a new head coach that has spent time under coaches that have continued to develop their game into national champions or great programs. That Michigan program with Mel Pearson is in a really great spot to do some damage next year. With the addition of a brand new coaching staff, if you will, what do these players have to look forward to? And what is the message from these 3 coaches as you head into the 2021-22 season?
Well, I think the message is easy, right? First of all, the new head coach for CC, from everything that I've read, is a guy that is similar to Brett Larson. That is a coach. He has built cultures everywhere he's gone. And when you spend time under Greg Carville, who also preaches culture, he preaches the person over the skill. I remember after the St. Cloud State Huskies, unfortunately, were the national runner-up to UMass there this last month. But a couple of his players said, when Greg came in, he said it was about being a good person, and the hockey player comes second. And I think, when you study under those types of people, you learn and you earn the respect of your players. And I think that's going to be the biggest change possibly. Now, again, I never heard anything negative about Mike Havlin in this program. But Mike Havlin's a little bit older. So I think, especially in today's sporting world, especially at the pro level, college level, I think a younger coach, whether it's a head coach or an assistant coach, Noah, there's something about connecting with players. And again, he's a liberal arts major. So communications is one of those kind of weird things where, you have to be good at it. I think one of the best anti-examples of that actually is former Minnesota Wild head coach Mike Yeo. I talked to him quite a bit. Wonderful human being, smart hockey guy. I think I've talked about him on the show before. But the one thing he could not figure out was how to approach the personalities differently, how to connect and really just have them buy into what he wanted them to do. And I think that's going to be something that looks like Mayotte is really, really, really good at. So, and the message, simple. This is a new slate. That's the absolute message. And guess what? We're done with being the worst team in the NCHC. It's not going to come overnight. And we're going to measure progress, not always by record, but how we are playing. And I think that's the biggest thing that, he's going to have to push is, can we expect CC to make a magic turnaround and be in the top 4? No. Is it possible? Sure. Does it happen that quick? Not normally. But you're going to have to find ways to measure success in different ways. And I think he will be able to communicate that. And, I think the big thing they have going for Colorado College is they're going to have a pretty good recruitment class coming in, a lot of Minnesota names, and we'll touch that here in a bit. But to me, that's how you have to sell it. We're selling this is a new era that, you got to stay with us through a couple of years. We're not going to be able to build overnight. And if, we all buy into what I think the way we can play the game, we're going to turn this program around. We're going to make some noise here in the best conference in all of college hockey.
I like that. I would have 2 goals here, just looking at the record. I think your first goal, get to 5 wins, and then you focus on 10 wins because that's evidence of the process working to its fullest extent. So that's where you take your model, like I'm talking about, with playing the right way and translating that into wins. I think that's where you start to see that piece. My second goal, I think, is to have a goal differential at -10, -5 or better, right? Continually growing that pace, because -43, that's a tough number. That's a tough number over 22 games, right? So, or 23, I should say, continuing to grow in that area of, like you mentioned, even if we're not winning hockey games, are we in those hockey games? Is it a 2-1 game? Is it a 4-3 game? Are we in those games? So I totally agree with you that creating that model of consistency and giving yourself a chance every night, especially with a goaltender like Matt Vernon, can give you for the Colorado College Tigers. Just about 5 minutes left here in our coverage of CC here, Nick. Looking at their schedule, 2 games starting off versus St. Louis at home in their new arena, 2 against Union College at Union, 1 against Boston and Northeastern Boston College, I believe. And then 2 home and homes versus Air Force, and they open NCHC play with St. Cloud State, playing every team 4 times except for Western Michigan and Duluth this year. And they've also got Arizona State for 2 games in December as well. Nick, looking at the freshman class and the transfer class, players that are coming in that can be those impact guys that are going to make a difference, is there anybody that stands out to you? And more specifically, they've only got 21 players listed on their roster sheet on their website so far. So who are going to be some of the new additions that we're looking forward to?
So there's one that sticks out quite a bit because this person was an absolute beast in the Minnesota State high school hockey tournament. That's Brett Schorsky. Yes, he is the son of another Schorsky who may have had an NHL career, may have won a Stanley Cup with Tampa. Also is now part of the ownership group in the St. Cloud Norsemen. He's been around, right? Brett Schorsky, a center from Edina. They list him as 6'6" at 190, and he's a centerman. I don't know if he's that tall. I've never seen it, but let's just say he is, right? I can't recall a forward for CC that's ever been have had that size. And I will tell you what, watching Brett Schorsky throughout the Minnesota State high school hockey tournament, he has got the ability to take over a hockey game. He is part of that new wave of skill we were talking about that CC really needs to add to really compete in the NCHC tournament. So to me, if there's one guy to focus on, it's Brett Schorsky. He is as good as advertised. And again, you talk about how you win more hockey games, that comes from strength down the middle. Now, as a freshman, of course, there's going to be, acclimating to the hockey world, the hockey speed, the physicality. But he, to me, is going to be kind of that cornerstone piece that this program really needs to build off of. I know you talked about some other guys leading, but to me, it's going to be Brett Schorsky, 100%.
I like that answer. You look on the back end as well, a guy I think Colorado College is looking to get back to form, if you will, Brian Yoon. 43 points in his first 2 seasons. Unfortunately, not the year that he was looking for last year as well. I think I don't know if he's battling some injury pieces with that as well, but you look for him to return to form in what is listed as his senior season, but who knows if he'll stay for an extra year on that. As we wrap up our coverage here for the Tigers here, Nick, my last 2 questions are this. If you're Colorado College, what is, again, and you kind of touched on this, what is the game plan for success for this group to have that success, to stay in those hockey games? What is their style of play have to be like? And then on the flip side, for St. Cloud State hockey fans, what is it going to take to beat this Colorado College Tigers team 4 times?
It's the same answer for both. Colorado College, if there's one thing they've been known for the last, how many years, and we've seen this, is they rarely get outworked. They work hard. And I think, especially now in a transition time, they're going to add some skill, yes, but I think for CC's game model, it's going to have to be working hard. They're going to have to win the board battles, to me, honestly. The skill will come, but I think if you just create the identity that, we're a new face of this squad, we're going to, even if we may not end up winning the game, we're certainly going to make life a living hell for you on the ice. I think that's going to be where it has to be. And for St. Cloud, expect them to come at you. CC never, despite their record, I don't think they ever really looked at their own record in the mirror and said, that bothers me. They give a hell of an effort every night in and out. Look what they almost did to St. Cloud State in the NCHC playoffs. This team does not go down. And now with CC adding some more younger players in and adding some more skill in, I think what St. Cloud State has to do to that is they're going to have to match and then outmatch that work ethic. I think it's going to have to start there for CC. For St. Cloud, again, just simple plays. We talked about puck control. We talked about just smarts with the puck too for St. Cloud. I think that was one of the things that really drove St. Cloud State's run to the NCAA championship game, was just making smart decisions with the puck. Again, with CC historically, it's been a team that sort of makes you almost beat yourself sometimes. And I think for CC, that will probably continue at least a little bit until we see more of the influence on the new coaching staff. So I wouldn't expect a whole lot of change, but just know that when you come to the ring against the Tigers, be ready to work, get your work boots on, because it's going to require a full 60-minute effort.
I like that. I think for me and the Colorado College Tigers, we're a package deal, can't you tell? For the CC Tigers, I think their goal for the season should be to complement their goaltending, because you're going to get good goaltending. You're going to get a goaltender that's going to give you a chance most nights. Complement that goaltending with either great defensive play or great offensive output. I think that's the goal, is how do you build from the back end up? I think that's where your key to success comes from for the Tigers. And if you're St. Cloud State, go back just a year ago, where they got absolutely walked over by Colorado College in their own building at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time that the Huskies had lost at home in regulation against an NCHC opponent, or an opponent in general, maybe NCHC as well, in a while. So you look at those moments and you say, okay, what went wrong here? And I think for St. Cloud, even as we moved into the tail end of the regular season, that consistency piece was a big piece of, if you go up to Duluth and you lose 5-0 there, you have to find a way to be consistent across all of your NCHC games, because any team can beat you on any given night. And I think St. Cloud, playing above the level of your opponent, don't just match their level, playing above that level, and be willing to be the aggressor and take control of the game. Because as you mentioned, it's a young CC group that maybe doesn't know how to handle that emotional adversity sometimes. Take the more veteran presence and good returning classes that you have for St. Cloud State and use that to your advantage, and be the more veteran and dominant team in those matchups. But that will do it for Colorado College. Wishing them the best of luck, except against the St. Cloud State Huskies, of course, in the upcoming NCHC season. We're going to transition into our extra ice session. We're going to talk about the Minnesota Wild as they're on the brink in a 3-1 deficit here against the Vegas Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And welcome into the Extra Ice session. Nick, the Minnesota Wild, our hometown club, unfortunately at this time of recording early on Sunday morning, down in a 3-1 deficit here with their season on the line. This potentially could be the last time, or basically the last time, that we talk about Minnesota Wild hockey, unless they can find a way to eke out 3 straight wins. Geez, math is tough today. 3 straight wins for 4 total wins here to punch their ticket to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. In my personal estimation here, Nick, I think that the Minnesota Wild have played well enough in certain moments and in certain stretches to have this be a 2-2 series, but that's just not the way hockey works right now. What is your opinion of the Minnesota Wild right now? They've had some clunker moments. They've had some moments of brilliance. They haven't had a lot of consistency. How have you felt about this Minnesota club, and do they have a snowball's chance in hell of climbing back in and winning Game 7 of this series?
Well, as we know with Stanley Cup playoff history, if it was watched enough, you're never out of it. You just never are. Minnesota Wild, back in 2003, you knew that twice in a row. Down 3-1 to Colorado, down 3-1 to Vancouver. There absolutely is a chance with this squad. To I think the bigger question you're asking is what's working, what wasn't working, and what isn't working. Here's what is working. Not a lot. No, I'm totally kidding. The forecheck actually is working for them actually quite well, especially early in the hockey game. What isn't working is how they are trying to take that hard forecheck and trying to get into the danger areas of the ice. Vegas is being very, very good in front of Marc-Andre Fleury. I know that Fleury, and rightfully so, is getting a lot of credit for the performance that he has, because he is coming up big when he is needed. But Vegas, the team in front of him, is making his job very, very easy. And I think in front of him. Also, what isn't working is the power play. 0 for 8. That cannot happen. A double minor last night as Zach Parise took a high stick from Zach Whitecloud. You have to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And Minnesota's power play was really, really bad, historically bad. First round of the regular season. Then it was historically good. And now we've come back down to the historically bad section again. And unfortunately, as you know, Noah, that, and for folks watching playoff hockey, sometimes at 5-on-5, if there isn't really much there, the special teams can make or break a series. And right now that is going to favor of Vegas, who actually has a shorthanded goal against the Wild here so far in the series, if not 2, if I recall. Is it 1 or 2?
I think it's just 1.
Is it just 1? Okay. I could be thinking of the regular season also as well.
That one shocked me with the Wild.
Right. Also, they can't. What's not working is anything off the rush. There's no offense on the rush at all. And number 2, leaky defense, especially at key times. Been way too many odd man breaks going against. And unfortunately, that is a requisite of your team trailing, because sometimes late in the game you're down by 1, down by 2. You're forechecking, but again, you can't get shots through. So now you start to pinch your D. You start to activate them more. And Vegas is they're way good structurally. You can absolutely tell that Pete DeBoer, he's gotten into that extra level, because with Gerard Gallant, this team always was an offensive threat, but they were very susceptible defensively. Pete DeBoer has came in and really stabilized them defensively. They have some different players too that I don't know how Mark Stone isn't a Selke finalist this year. He's been absolutely phenomenal. And one thing that should scare Minnesota Wild fans too, and I hate to say this, was they've been winning without Max Pacioretty and Tomas Nosek. So those are guys that, if you can win a series, win games without those 2 players in the lineup, I think Max Pacioretty definitely holds more weight than Nosek does. But what does that say if he is good to go on Monday against Minnesota in Vegas? That doesn't spell good for this squad. It just doesn't. What has to change is I think you have to do some line juggling. I think you have to possibly reunite Victor Rask, Kaprizov, and Matt Zuccarello. That's the one big X to me, is that Kaprizov has not been able to really do what he's been able to do. And I'll credit Vegas for being very good. They put Mark Stone up against him a lot, especially in Vegas at home. I was hoping that with last change, we get a more favorable matchup, and there's just not enough open ice for him. And Ryan Hartman's played, I think, some pretty good hockey, but to me, he's just not the type of centerman that is going to be most effective between those two. So I don't know. There's a chance, yes, but it's not looking big for the hometown Wild. And if there's anything, Noah, that is good that comes out of this, let's just say the Wild do end up losing on Monday and their season does end. It does show the need, I think, for a more explosive offensive center. And we talked about that in some previous episodes. And I think for Billy Garrett, he's going to have hopefully maybe some easier decisions to make with some players that may be returning on expiring contracts and on some RFAs. So I think there's some exposing being done here by the Vegas Golden Knights and that the Minnesota Wild. Although they've been better this season, and I think they've been a lot more fun to watch than years past, still have some ladders to climb to get to be a true contender for the Stanley Cup. I'm curious as to what you think is working and what's not working for this club, because and I think a lot of it we would agree on, but I'm curious to see your take on it.
When you're talking about that premier forward that the Wild want to add, you're talking about Zach Phillips, right?
Exactly.
Oh boy. Anyway, I think if you look back in this series, and the reason I say that this could be 2-2, game one, I thought Vegas was the slightly better team, although Minnesota, they held in and weathered the storm, and I think they got better as the game went along. Game two was Minnesota's to lose, unfortunately. They were so good in game two. Game three was a clunker. Vegas deserved to win that 1-10-0. Yesterday's game, Minnesota, like you mentioned, you ran into a team that has won the Jennings Trophy for being the best defensive team in the NHL. And I think that really showed last night. And as you mentioned, Minnesota down 1-0, maybe played a little bit with gripping the sticks too tight. I think that was kind of the culmination of that. And when you start to do that, you start to take chances. Quickly it became 3-0 off of two defensive pinches, if you will, in result of turnovers on top of that. So the puck was turned over with a defenseman that was either moving forward or a defenseman that was flat-footed. Someone made the comment the other night that Matt Dumba was -2 in that hockey game, specifically the goal where Alex Tuch came in and split the defenders and made that play. That play is not on Matt Dumba to me. Could he have maybe done more and tried to just step in front of Alex Tuch? Sure, but if you're a defenseman moving up the ice and the puck gets turned over that quickly with a guy who has a ton of speed and steps through, that's a difficult play. Everyone wants to pinpoint Matt Dumba on that. And sure, he hasn't had the greatest series, but that
not all his fault.
I said that's a huge breakdown in defensive turnovers and coverage.
And just to briefly add to that, no, I don't want to step on your toes here, but if you want Matt Dumba to step in front of a truck and Alex Tuch, then you're drawing a penalty, and the Vegas Golden Knights power play has been pretty good throughout the season and the playoffs.
Yeah, if you didn't want Alex Tuch to do that, maybe don't give him away. Anyway, okay, so yeah, he's been a wild killer though. there's no looking around it. The other thing is this: when Minnesota has had threatened the middle of the ice, Marc-Andre Fleury has done his job. That's the other thing too, is that this reminds me a lot of the series back in, I can't even remember what year it was. Was it 15, 16, something like that? Maybe 17. It was the year Minnesota was great offensively. And Jake Allen suddenly had the one good playoff series of his entire career and stood on his head, especially in that game one. That's what it makes me think of, is anytime Minnesota does get those opportunities, they're just not getting any puck luck. That's the other thing too. One guy that I think if you're Minnesota, you want to not only emulate, but continue to support is Kevin Fiala. I really liked, although he hasn't really been on the score sheet that much, Kevin Fiala, his poise with the puck, his ability to pick his way through the neutral zone, enter the offensive zone with speed is great. But the thing is, when he's 1-on-4, it's pretty easy to figure out who you have to cover, right? So I think if you're wingers on that line, or whoever's on the ice with them at that time, just drive the net, drive a lane, create some space for Fiala to be able to do something, because I think that that's what Minnesota is missing, like you mentioned, is to get through the middle of the ice. Yes, you need those skill players to threaten the middle of the ice, but you also need the guys without the puck to create some opportunities for you and create some space. For those who are not well hockey versed, and that's probably including us, but the way the game of hockey works, the guy with the puck is the least important guy on the ice. Shocker. He's the least important guy on the ice at that particular point. The guys without the puck are the guys that make plays happen. Yes, can you have nice individual plays? Minnesota, besides Fiala and Kaprizov, really don't have those guys that are going to go end-to-end Connor McDavid style rushes. The other thing, I've actually been really happy with Krill Kabrizov's play. I think the one thing that he's learning is that he's just going to have to be stronger on pucks. I think he's done a really nice job on the forecheck. I think he's done a really nice job being hard on pucks, going through the gauntlet of cross checks that he's gone through. It's been kind of ridiculous, actually, that the amount of times that he's been tied up. But I've actually been all right with his play. I think Vegas is just suffocated him. Great defensively, just because that's their structure. As far as goaltending is concerned for the Minnesota Wild, I thought Cam Talbot has been all right for the most part. I thought that those 2 breakaways, it would have been nice to steal one there in last night's game to keep the Wild in the contest. But the Minnesota Wild, with 10 minutes left in the third, shots were 29-14 in favor of the Wild. So what does that tell you about it? Now, a lot of those plays could be perimeter chances, if you will, but nonetheless, Vegas was just opportunistic last night and took a very nice road win. So what has to change? Threatening the middle of the ice. You and I, we've touched on this for the last 5 minutes here. They have to find a way to the middle of the ice and create second chance opportunities or opportunities through traffic. One thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, and Ian Cole does it all the time. Nick Bonino did it the other night too. Shoot the puck right away. It does not have to be a booming slap shot. It does not have to be a seeing eye puck that goes top cheddar. As soon as you get a puck and you have bodies in front, shoot it. Jared Spurgeon had a similar play in period number 2 of last night's game as well. He steps into the middle of the ice, gets a great pass. He's on his backhand, mind you. Tries to thread a pass over to Zach Parise. You remember the play? And they broke that play up. Open your hands up, pull that to your forehand, shoot a puck. You're down near the slot, like near the hash marks. You got 2 bodies in front, a great battle in front. Shoot it. Like
now to your point, there's part of Vegas is influencing that because they've been very good at blocking perimeter shots from anybody on the Wild. And so what that tells you is that, because again, you blocking shots means it's going the other way, right? That's also been contributing to some of those odd man rushes. Is at the end of it, that means that you're losing confidence in your ability to get the puck through. And now you're trying to make an extra pass that you don't need to be making to try to make something out of nothing in the player's mind there. So I think you're right there. It's just getting off quick, and it doesn't matter. Keep it low, right? Yeah. Go low. And again, in the game of professional NHL hockey, that window or that little seam that opens up to get a puck through, it's not going to be there long. And again, if Ryan Suter, for a guy who maybe isn't the most fleet of foot anymore, if there's one thing he still does well is just when he sees it, he just shoots it, right? And it's not always a hard puck, but it doesn't matter if it gets there and you got bodies there. It's all that matters. I want to before we leave today, I want you to finish up your thought. I want to give my thoughts on the disallowed goal.
That's actually where we're going. What a crock of horse shit that was.
No,
by definition, it is goaltender interference because of the fact that there's a foot and a butt. I'm totally taking your point. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
But let's talk about rule book versus integrity of the game. And I know that when you look at the rule book and you're reviewing that play for the NHL, I understand the decision they made. But I think if you're looking from a pure hockey perspective, does it look different than the rule book states?
100%. You have to, it's like basketball, right? You initiate the contact to draw the call. That's a savvy veteran move by Marc-Andre Fleury. And the problem that I had with it from the rule book's perspective is, and this is going to be, I think, a topic of conversation in years to come, is if Marcus Foligno was out of the crease, and I think both feet it was close. And then when he turned, his back skate got in there. I don't think there was any way that would have
influenced the ability to make a save.
Make a save. But the problem was the overhead view, I think, is the one everybody focuses on, right? Is that Fleury on top of the crease he pushes into Foligno and the puck goes by him. And it appears, again, to me, and I think for folks that are hockey savvy, he absolutely initiated contact. To me, there's no question on that. But Fleury knows. Fleury he's a smart goaltender. He knows that call is going to go his way pretty much every single time. If that puck doesn't go in the net, we're not even talking about it, right? We're talking about a net front battle with Marc-Andre Fleury. The question is going to be in years past, or in years to come, I should say, is what is that line going to be for goaltender? If you can deem a goaltender initiated the contact, does that take that away? Right now, it does not by the rule book. And I think that's the part that's most frustrating is, if a goaltender initiates contact, what does that mean? There's so much gray area there. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But it's a call, unfortunately, that was never going to go the Wild's way. Unfortunately, in that situation, just never was.
Well, the other challenge too is this. It's one thing too when you set up as a forward in front of the net versus when you're reacting to the puck that's coming towards you. I think that's where the other piece too is like it's all about a timing piece. There's essentially three sounds like a scientific like analysis, but there's three stages of net front presence when a defenseman is shooting a puck. Number one, you got to get your ass to the crease, right? You got to set up in front. It's the introductory phase, if you will, introducing yourself in front of the blue paint. Number two, body position. This means that not only are your hips square, you're square to the shooter, and you're creating essentially your stick is in the middle of your body, and you're available to deflect a puck in either direction at any time. Okay, so that's step number two, is where you've set up your body, your positioning, and that's where you're going to be to create this play. Step three is the culmination of it all. The puck comes in, the defenseman tries to push you out of the way, the goaltender tries to either push you out of the way or make a save. That's where I think that you have to look at if you're the NHL in this next step, is where in the second phase of that, when he, there are some plays where they're roving tips, if you will, where guys skate across and tip the puck as they're skating across. But in that specific instance, if you look at Marcus Foligno, he stops and sets up. You understand at that point, that's where he's going to be in that play for that split second. It's only a second or two. I mean, it's not like this big drawn out process, but he's only there for a second or two. I think you look at where was he in the previous second versus where is he now? And it's like, has Marcus Foligno moved? How much did Marcus Foligno move? You know what I mean?
I'll take that one step further. I think what has to be the defining factor moving forward, and I think this is like a good place to wrap up the conversation, is I think the NHL has to dictate, was he trying to make a save or was he trying to push physical contact?
By a call, yeah.
Right. So, and I think that has to be the next sort of definition added, maybe.
And that's what I'm saying is, if you see a player that's set in phase number two or whatever you want to call it, the goaltender, it's on the onus of the goaltender to now focus on making a save, similar to the players focused on making a redirect. If you see a goaltender who then initiates contact in between those fleeting moments, then you know that their focus is no longer making a save. Their focus is creating as much contact as possible, if that makes sense. I know it's like, it makes sense in my head, and if we had it on the screen, it'd be a lot easier to explain. But
so I'll help you if you don't mind.
Thank you.
So if Marcus Foligno is outside the blue plane in his skates, he has every right to that ice as the goaltender does. But if you, by video review, deem that the goaltender is trying to create his own space more, meaning he doesn't like the fact he's there, and he's, instead of engaging a save, engaging in the player, meaning he's pushing on him, trying to give himself more space. If you deem that he's trying not to make a hockey save, are we starting to sound like football again? What the hell is a catch? I think so. But I think that's where that could be tweaked. And the problem is, does that provide clarity? Maybe. Does it provide more obscurity? Probably. So it's still a judgment call either way. But I do feel like, there has to be a little bit more of an avenue for the referees to make a subjective call that says, was he really trying to make a save here, or was he really trying to buy a call? We now have diving and embellishment at the NHL. That's a call. As horrendous as I've seen them called or not called at times, I do feel like in these situations where goaltender interference, which can decide a game, I think this was that
was a 1-1 game at that point.
That was a 1-1 game. Yep. I think there has to be an avenue for the referees to ask the question, was he attempting to make a save, or was he engaging physically with the defender in front of him who was legally outside the crease? And did he essentially give himself less of a chance to make the save and not the player in front of him?
Yeah.
I think that has to be the change in verbiage at some point.
Well, we love subjective calls in the NHL. They usually go well, right? Especially with goalie interference. Okay, so final question, final verdict. Nick, you saw it live. When you saw it live, in your opinion, I guess even after the fact, in your opinion, goal or no goal?
I thought it was a goal, honestly. I really felt like especially when you watched over a cam, Foligno is stationary. He's not backing into Marc-Andre Fleury. And more importantly, his feet were outside of the crease. To me, he has every right to be in that white ice. And for Fleury, if you're going to go up to the top of your crease, that's fine. But if you initiate the contact, in my personal opinion, that to me should be a goal for the Minnesota Wild. I don't know how it's Marcus Foligno's fault that when he's standing in the ice that he clearly can stand in. Why? Because the goaltender wants to be above the crease, we'll call it, right, for hockey lingo, or on top of it, if he bumps into him, why that is the offensive player's fault and why the goaltender just has to be a little bit better working around. To me, that's a goal. It shouldn't have been called back, in my personal opinion. I think that's got to be something that the league has to look at for years moving forward.
Same. I thought that majority, 95% of Foligno's body was outside the crease, and the 5% that was there was not even in play until Marc-Andre Fleury very smartly made it part of the play. So I definitely agree. It should have been a goal as well. But if you're the Minnesota Wild, take some keys from Marcus Foligno. Don't change that mentality at all. Continue to get traffic and bodies in front of the net. And it's desperation time. Backs against the wall. The Minnesota Wild looking to climb back with 3 straight victories to punch their ticket to the second round. That will do it for episode number 62 of the Huskies Warming House podcast. We've got Josh Fenton, NCHC commissioner, on the docket for next week, albeit potentially a little bit later for the Healthy Scratch interview this upcoming week. Brett Larson, potentially Scott Sandlin, and a whole lot more coming to you from the Huskies Warming House podcast, as well as episode 63, of course, on Sunday. We'll see you back here in the den, and thanks for joining us.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores. Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Krill the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.